Thank you very much, Michael, for this very nice introduction. Now I have to stand to the expectations, I feel. Well, so yes, I will present on the labor market inequalities and fertility in the context of the globalization and rapid technological change. And basically what I will be showing are pieces of the ERC grant which I'm conducting at the University of Warsaw, as Michael has already said. So, okay. Now I see. So, as you know, labor market conditions and labor force participation of individuals are very important determinants of family formation. And there has been plenty of research showing how much labor market and labor force participation affects family formation. And I'm not going into this. However, these conditions of participating in the labor market have changed tremendously over the last 2 or 3 decades during something which we often now refer to as the structural labor market change. And the 2 important drivers of this structural labor market change are globalization and technological change. Globalization basically, as we all know, increased the competition in the labor market. It led to the situation in which organizations had to lower the production costs, including the labor costs, and increase productivity. And technological change largely allowed this. It allowed to lower the labor costs by providing the automats, machine and industrial robots, and maybe now also other tools, which actually replace human labor, which seem to be cheaper, and which also do not get sick, like humans do. And then information and communication technologies allow to connect workers living in distant places and working in different organizations, working in organizations located in distance, also allow workers to provide work outside of the standard working hours. So actually work maybe more intensely or longer. And these developments, of course, have implications for workers. Some of the workers get redundant. Other workers, they become more wired maybe to the workplace, but also get the possibility to adjust their working hours more flexibly to the family demands. And this, of course, also has implications for the family formation. And in my talk today, I will talk about this implication, so I will show you some pieces of the research that we conducted, which basically illustrate how these changes in the labor market affect family formation. But before I move to this, I would like to say a little bit few more words about these changes in the labor market so that we all know what I'm talking about. So, well, automation. So, this automation, how much does it destroy jobs? There is lots of discussion. You probably read about this lots of time in the media or heard about this on the TV. And there has been also lots of research about this in the US and also in Europe. And basically this research shows that yes, jobs do get destroyed. Some occupations even do get destroyed completely by automation. But these numbers, the proportion of these jobs which get destroyed is not huge. So these are the estimates, around 9 to 14% of jobs is predicted to be at high risk of automation. So it's predicted to actually be destroyed. Another 25 to 30% is at high risk, medium risk of automation. So it will basically change. 50 to 70% of the tasks people do in these jobs will be automated. Well, not huge numbers. Also, other jobs are being created. But what is important to say here is actually that these numbers that I'm giving here are not equally distributed among workers. So some jobs conducted largely by the low and medium educated workers get destroyed far more than the jobs conducted by the highly educated workers, which actually so far have not been affected Maybe with the development of the artificial intelligence, they will be. I'm not talking about this. Actually, we have completely no idea how this will develop. But at least the automation which has been taking place so far, so industrial robots, automats, machines, for instance, in supermarkets, that's the effects that they are having on the labor market. So low educated lose, lower medium educated lose, highly educated gain. And I think this graph presents this very nicely. So it shows changes in something which economists call task content of jobs. So every job requires that we do some tasks. These tasks can be cognitive, so they require data processing, complex thinking, also complex communication with people, problem solving, management. So these are cognitive tasks, social or analytical. But some jobs do not require highly cognitive tasks. We call these jobs, well, jobs which are non-cognitive, tasks which are non-cognitive. They can be routine, repetitive, or manual, like for instance, cleaning. And we can see from this graph, it's an average for several European countries, but I didn't cherry pick these countries. These are simply countries for which I could have data since the early 90s. For other countries, the data starts later. But basically, in all European countries, as well US, we observe the same trend. An increase in the number of in the proportion of cognitive tasks which are being done in the labor market and demanded, and a decline in non-cognitive tasks, or decline in jobs which require non-cognitive tasks being done. This means that actually the lower educated persons or medium educated persons who do these non-cognitive jobs, they are less demanded in the labor market, while highly educated persons who can do cognitive jobs, they are more demanded in the labor market. And these highly educated persons not only are more employable and not only probably more stable in the labor market, but they also gain the flexibility. They can work from home, increasingly work from home. And this phenomenon of working from home, it didn't start only during the pandemic. Actually, as you can see, the proportion of workers working from home has been increasing already since the early 90s. In the UK, actually, and that's not a mistake, the proportion was already pretty high even in the 90s. But this working from home is available, well, we can see, to professionals, managers, to some extent also technicians and clerks, but very rarely to the middle and low educated workers. Okay, so that's the structural labor market change. It basically implies growing inequalities between high and low to middle educated workers in terms of employability, earnings, stability of jobs, and also flexibility. And what is important, this is an ongoing change. It's not cyclical, like the economic recession which comes, people lose their jobs, maybe they are unemployed for some time, but then the recession is over and then they gain employment again. This is a structural development which just goes on, right? So it's not that suddenly robots just get switched off and these people return to factories. It doesn't also mean that they lose their jobs and they are completely unemployed forever. The research shows that they actually find employment, but in lower service sector. These are usually poorer quality jobs. Okay, so starting from here, I would like to say how these changes in the labor market affect family formation. And I will be showing you actually very similarly to Inaki, although we didn't speak before, I want to show you pieces from 3 studies which we conducted in our project. So this is study number 1. In this study, we look how doing a cognitive work versus non-cognitive work affects entry to parenthood. So we focused on the entry to parenthood. This study was conducted in collaboration with Honorata Bogusz, who is sitting actually here, a PhD student, and also Michaela Kreyenfeld. It is located in Germany, and we used the German socioeconomic panel, which allowed us to trace the fertility and employment behaviors of workers since the late 80s till 2019. In addition, we also use the employment survey of the German Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training. This is a survey which started in late 70s, I think, or early 80s, was conducted every 5 years, and it is a cross-sectional survey which provides information on which tasks people do in their jobs. So, for instance, whether they analyze data, or they actually do something manual, or they have to communicate with people, they have to supervise workers, and so on and so forth. Using this data, we computed cognitive task intensities measures in a way that we looked how many tasks a person conducted in the job, how many of these tasks were cognitive. Then we computed the ratio. That was still at the respondent level, and then we averaged these ratios within each occupation to construct occupational level measures. And these measures were plugged into the German socioeconomic panel at the occupational level. Then we used discrete time event histories in order to analyze how workers conducting jobs which are rich in cognitive tasks versus jobs which are not rich in cognitive tasks are related to the entry to parenthood. And these are the findings. Here I show the predicted annual probabilities for women and men. And we also divided this cognitive task intensity into two types. So the analytic cognitive task intensities and social, the way it is done in the literature. But basically, what you can see is that actually for both women and men in Germany, I was even astonished, I didn't expect for Germany. We can see some positive association between the level of cognitive task intensity and entry to parenthood. So actually those who do more cognitive jobs are more likely to enter. For women, for the analytic task measures, this relationship is not very evident. For the interactive or social task intensity, it is already significant, while for men, the relationship between analytic cognitive task intensity and the entry to parenthood is more evident and stronger. Then, of course, these findings refer to the whole period, 1986. 2019. So we also wanted to see whether there were any changes over time, consistently with this structure, with what the structural labor market change research would suggest. So we looked how these associations changed over time. And you can see here these graphs. They are only for women. For men, we find very similar patterns. We see how these associations changed over 3 time periods. And what we can evidently see is a decline in the entry to parenthood, in the probability of entering parenthood for women conducting jobs which are low in cognitive task intensity. So basically jobs, well, which do not require lots of cognitive tasks, cognitive thinking. We also can see, but only for the interactive tasks, some increase in the probability of entering parenthood for women who do a task high in cognitive, interactive tasks. And it's also important to note that there is this light green bar or dot is not visible for the earliest period, late 80s and 90s, because we didn't identify any jobs or enough jobs which would be high in cognitive tasks at that time, neither for women nor for men. Okay, so these are the findings. And now you could say, well, but maybe these findings, these positive relationships between cognitive work and entry to parenthood are driven by fertility timing, which can be really the case because people, when they finish education, what we found in the data at the beginning, not necessarily jump into highly cognitive jobs because that requires time. You have to still acquire knowledge and skills. And so actually, only with the time, they start working in these highly cognitive jobs, and then they are at higher ages, and then they might accelerate childbearing. And indeed, we find it. But then we wanted to know, we interacted these measures with age of the respondent, and we wanted to know, okay, so is this only timing, or there is something more? And that's, of course, very difficult to answer this question with event history methods, event history analysis methods. But what we decided to do, we computed first birth cumulative incidence curves, right? We predicted the hazard, then we computed the survival curve, and from this the cumulative incidence curves for 3 cases. Case 1 is a person who is in education until age 29 and then has high analytic task intensity. This is the violet. Case 2, a person is in education until age 24 and then has a medium task analytic intensity. This is the yellow number. And case 3, a person has always low analytic task intensity, the dark green. And what you can see is that in the late 80s and over the 90s, there were basically no differences between case 2 and case 3, low and medium task intensity persons. So these women basically were 20% of them were remaining childless, 75% were becoming mothers till the end of their reproductive careers. But we observe a clear change over time. We can see that actually in the later period, it is the women who do highly cognitive jobs and jobs of medium cognitive intensity, which are more likely to become mothers by the end of their reproductive lives, and least likely to become childless. So clearly, we observe a difference between these let's say two types of women, depending on the jobs that they do. Okay, so these are our findings, right? But, well, you could say, well, this is basically, you tell this story about this cognitive task intensity, but that's basically what you could also find by interacting education and whether the person works or not, and probably largely yes, we didn't check, but I could expect this. So is it related to the structural labor market change, the story that you are telling us? So, well, study 2. Here we looked more closely into fertility effects of automation, so basically adoption of industrial robots in industrial sectors. Sometimes when I say that we conduct a study in which we look how the adoption of industrial robots affects fertility, people look at me as if I was completely crazy. I mean, what robots have to do with fertility? So, well, they have to do because they affect whether the person can continue employment. Then sometimes people ask me, then why don't you study unemployment and fertility? Well, I don't, because we know quite a lot about unemployment and fertility, so I cannot imagine I could contribute anything new to this. However, people who work in sectors which are robotizing, these people still have a job. Maybe even a permanent one, a stable one, but still they feel the pressure that soon this may end. They may know that their co-workers lost already employment. The wages in the sectors, and there is evidence for this, are stagnant, are not growing. So clearly the quality and prestige of these jobs, which used to be prestigious, at least for this social group, is declining. And that is why I'm looking how working in the sector which is exposed to automation affects fertility. This study is conducted in Sweden, not in Germany this time. Germany is the most automized country in Europe, actually one of the most in the world, but Sweden also belongs to the highly automatized countries. And the study is conducted together with Linus Andersson from the Stockholm University and my postdoc Wojciech Hardy. We also cover quite a long period since 1993 to 2017, and this is good because basically automation started at the beginning of the 90s. We use Swedish register data, and in addition we use data from the International Federation of Robotics, and this data source provides us with information about the stock of robots in industries in every year in Sweden, I mean in other countries as well, and it's quite detailed. So it provides us with information about how many robots are used in automotive industry, textile industry, chemical industry, and so on and so forth. So using this data, we constructed the measure of exposure to robotization, which is the number of robots employed in a given industry at the given time, at a given year, divided by the initial employment in the sector. Initial means in 1993, and this measure basically captures to what extent robotization replaces the initial employment in the sector. Again, this measure is constructed at the industry level, so we plug it into the register data using the data information about the industry, and we implement discrete time event history models. These are the findings for men and women. Like the colleague Linus Andersson actually worked very hard and looked not only into first or second birth, but also marriage, third birth, and divorce. These are the findings. I mean, you see they are significant, but you can also very clearly see that these effects are very small. So when I looked into it, they basically show, for instance, by how much the marriage risk declines when the robotization in the sector increases by 1 standard deviation. When you look into this, you see they are very small. So when I looked into it, I thought, okay, nothing. It doesn't matter that they are significant because this is registered data, huge sample. But then we thought, okay, let's interact this measure with education of the worker, because we know that these are the low and medium educated workers who lose from robotization. Highly educated workers who are employed in these sectors, they probably do not fear of being replaced by robots. And that's what we find. Much more is happening. We actually, for men, we see very clear gradients apart from the third birth, which is a bit weird. We can see that actually workers who are highly educated, ISCAT 6 to 8, this is a little bit adopted to the Swedish reality. They have few low educated, lots of highly educated. So the pink is the highly educated. We can see that actually workers who are highly educated and who work in sectors where robotization is increasing, they actually, this increase in robotization is positively associated with their marriage risks, positively associated with the first and second birth risks, and negatively associated with the divorce risks. And exactly the opposite for the low educated. Low educated are ISCAT 1 to 3. These are the navy blue. And we can see that the increase in robotization in the sector for these workers means a decline in marriage risk, decline in first and second birth risks, and an increase in divorce. For the first birth, as I said, the findings are not very clear for us. For women, a similar story with one difference. It seems here it's the medium educated women who are negatively affected, not the low educated women. And we can't fully explain it, but we think it's due to the fact that actually men and women do different jobs, and for somehow women with medium education are more affected. Or maybe the low educated women, well, when they in Sweden, even in Sweden with high gender equality, maybe just decide, okay, well, I have nothing to lose, and then they have a child, which the highly educated wouldn't do in Sweden. Maybe, but this we don't fully understand. Okay, so just to conclude, it seems, just for Sweden, working in a sector with high automation hampers family formation of low or middle skilled workers. And this is just Sweden. We managed to do it just for Sweden. We plan to extend the study to other countries as well. Okay, now the third one. The third one is a bit different, working from home and fertility. So in this study, we look how working from home is related to first and second birth transition. The study is conducted together with also my postdoc, Beata Osiewalska, and the study is located in the United Kingdom. I told you that in the United Kingdom there were quite some work from home already in the 90s and the 2000s, which is due to the regulations that they introduced. It was possible to request flexible working hours or working from home when one needed this. Okay, so we use the Understanding Society data for the period 2009-2019. We limit the sample to partner women. The data allows us to provide us with information whether the person had access to working from home, and if yes, whether the person regularly used this possibility. So we constructed two categories: regular use of working from home, and the other category, a more blurred one, irregular use. Well, unsure whether actually they use it, but they have access, and no access, the third category. These are the findings. We expected positive relationship. We didn't find it at first. So basically you can see that actually when it comes to the first birth, these are predicted probabilities. Persons who work on site, they are more likely to have a child. And those who work from home, either regularly or not, they are less likely. We also, and for the second birth, we don't find anything. But then the editor, we sent it to a journal, and the editor said, oh, but why don't you check by education? Because I think that actually these low-educated persons, you have also some low-educated persons working from home, and they are probably more precarious, and your findings might be driven by this. I was not convinced. I thought, well, there are very few, the low-educated persons working from home. But it turned out that the editor was right. So indeed, this negative relationship between working from home and first birth was driven by the low-educated persons. These persons, they rarely have access to working from home. But once they have it, they are actually less likely to work from home, because it's probably related also to some precarity. Or that's another explanation we came up with, that perhaps they don't have resources, for instance, to manage the home duties, housework, childcare. They do everything themselves. They work from home, and then they also take care of the child, and that's stressful, and there is lots of spillover between the two activities. And while the highly educated have resources to actually outsource some of this childcare or housework duties. So negative relationship between working from home for the below tertiary educated, and nothing for the tertiary educated. And when it comes to the second birth, again, negative relationship for the low and middle educated, and for the tertiary educated, there seems to be some positive gradient, but it's on the verge of significance, right? And, well, the question is what would be if the sample was larger. But unfortunately, we had to work with what we had. So that's the conclusion from this study. There are some signs of a positive relationship between workplace autonomy and second birth risk. But if there are, that's only for the highly educated, the lower and medium educated, who usually don't have access to this flexibility. But even if they have, that doesn't help their family formation. So basically, again, we find that they are disadvantaged. So, well, basically the story is that the inequalities that we observe in the labor market, they get translated into the family formation. That's the result that we got from these 3 studies, and we are trying now to replicate them in other country contexts. It's not easy because, for instance, we tried working from home in Germany, but there is very few working from home in the German socioeconomic panel, because the incidence of working from home in Germany was pretty low in comparison to the UK. Well, we also try to investigate the exposure to automation and fertility in other countries, but that's much easier to do with the register data, with the big sample, where we have, because we have to have lots of variation within each sector, and with the survey data, it's not easy. But we are trying to expand to other countries. For the moment, I showed you what we have, and I could stop here. But I would like to give one more twist to this presentation and basically I ask myself, what these 2 low and middle educated people can do? So they are excluded from the good jobs. They are getting excluded from family formation. Well, can they do something about this? Well, so they can protest. And they sometimes do, like the Yellow Jackets did in France. And they can also vote. right? Fortunately, I would say, actually. At least they can say something. And maybe less fortunately, they tend to vote for the populist parties, because the populist parties somehow are able to understand their situation, and at least in the communication with them, or in the way they, in their narrative, they are able to address these fears these people have and these disadvantages that they face. And I think that's, well, that's what the others find. There is this there are these clear links between being exposed to globalization and technological change and voting to the radical right. Also, migration, of course, contributes to this, but apart from migration, this also seems to be the case. So, well, the question is what we can do. I mean, we cannot stop the technological change. I'm not sure it would be good, but probably it would be good to think about some institutions, and that would be like for further to check which institutions, to investigate which institutions could help. So, okay, so I would like to thank you for the invitation. It was really a pleasure that I could present some of my work here, and I'm looking forward to your comments and suggestions. The project is still going on, so we will be happy to implement them.